Hi everyone, it's Adios Amigo, and I'm doing sort of the wrap up for the entry level of headphones. If your price category is somewhere around $25 or below, depending on what kind of sales are going on, or the regional availability of these headphones in your area. So these are the three that I've personally obtained and tested. Some longer than others. I've had the Koss for much longer than I've had the other two, but I honestly probably had more head time with the other two. Normally I have, a series of 4 comparisons plus sound signature, depending on what you're looking for, to kind of narrow down the field. In this one, we'll start off with the obvious, which is price. If you don't have $20+ to spend, then your option really is only the Sony. You don't have to look further. This is the only one that I've personally used that you can be had for $10 on Amazon. The other two typically that I found range from the mid-20s to 30s. So they're still budget, and you can still have them for under 25 with a deal, but they would not be the absolute budget conscious. You don't have the money to work with something else. That would just be the Sony. Sound-wise, these two are more alike than the JVCs. They're a little bit warmer. The Koss less so. I did find the sound changed a little bit by going to the Yaxi pads. I think there was just a little bit more bass emphasis on them. But when I go back in between them two, the Sony definitely is the warmer of the two. It has the smaller stage. Everything feels closer up. And I think the Koss probably stretches into more roles, especially for things like outdoor wear. I do like the fact that it's ported in the back, so you can actually use it outside and hear things going on around you. I do prefer open backs, generally speaking. And I found the staging and imaging was a little bit more accurate than the Sony, and the mids were a little bit more forward, which is typically my preference between the two. And the treble wasn't, earth-shattering, and the Sony did have a little bit more extended bass. So if you want more bass experience, again, the Sony might be the way to go. Whereas the JVC is just bright, harshly so to my ears at normal listening volumes. And I do find that the stage and imaging is better on the JVC, but because the treble and upper mids and mids are so bright, it is not worth it unless you turn the volume down. And I'm okay with listening at quieter volumes, so that didn't bother me that much. But for people who are looking to have their ears blasted open, unless you appreciate that very bright sound, and frankly, I heard ringing in the treble, which is never a good sign, I would probably stay away from the JVC. And the intended use, again, is going to make a big difference. Here you can see I've got the cable wrapped around the foam block, but I think in the end it ended up being like 11 feet, whereas these two are much more manageable and meant to be worn probably from pocket to head rather than from a long distance to your desktop or something like that, depending on the way you have your PC set up or your listening station or whatever it is. If there's a distance between where you're sitting and where your amp is, these are probably going to require an extender of some kind in order to get there. In terms of modularity, they're all kind of in a very similar category, I feel like. I know that there are replacement pads that you can probably fit onto the Sony. I know that they exist for the Koss because obviously I replaced them. And I was able to squeeze some Brainwaves pads onto the JVC. So the pads probably are swappable, but the cables are fixed on all of them. And one interesting tidbit that I didn't bring up before, but I'll bring up now. With a short cable, you can always add an extender. You can find a 3.5 to female to 3.5 male, and you can make it longer if you need to. It's much more difficult to make the cable shorter, which is a problem for the JVC. So the JVC really is sort of specialized for stationary use. You're not supposed to be wearing it while you are physically active in any kind of capacity, including a very casual walk. That's an interesting whiskey. But anyway, in terms of modularity, they're probably in very similar categories, except for the fact that you can't really make the cable shorter, but you can always add extensions to the short cables. In terms of comfort, frankly, I found the Sony and the JVC to be a step up from the Koss. Because the Koss does not have much movement on a vertical pitch, it was just uncomfortable for me to wear. I do know they make much larger pads you can get for these to make these possibly more comfortable. But at that point, you're already spending money to get a headphone that I think you can just spend that money to get better headphones rather than try to mod these. And I think the other headphones are better. So it's an option, but the whole point of this series was to keep the budget low, and spending an additional 50% of the headphone budget on pads just didn't seem like a valid avenue to pursue when you're specifically looking for cheaper headphones. So in the end, it's kind of very up to what you're looking for as a purchasing person. Completely budget conscious, just looking to listen to some basic pop or electronic music, you want a little bit more extended bass, the Sony's fine. And to my ears, it's much more comfortable. It's a little rattly. I discussed that in the original review, but it's comfortable. Surprisingly so, considering it's half the price of the Koss. The JVC kind of follows suit with the cheap, rattly... What was that? Plastics. I think that was my headphone. That sucks. I hope they're good, actually. But it sits comfortably on the ear. And ironically, I think the Koss probably felt the most solid out of all three, but it was also the least comfortable to wear, so I spent the least amount of time with it. So if it's something that you're just looking to wear while you're physically active, if it fits your head, the Koss is okay. If it doesn't, though, like me, then again, the Sony would be the way to go. And if you're going for a desktop route, if you want bright, JVC. If you want warm, you have two other options here if you can make the Koss comfortable. If you're gaming, very specifically, I would probably recommend going for the JVC or the Koss. The Sony does work. I didn't feel like I was at a disadvantage necessarily, but the stage felt a lot more closed in, so I could get a decent directional cue from the audio in a video game. This is mostly tested with Rainbow Six Siege, but the distance was compressed, so it was hard to tell how far away something was. Whereas the JVC, I felt, probably handled that the best out of these three. But the Koss wasn't terrible either. I think it's definitely doable for that scenario. And that said, I do believe the Koss out of these three is the only one that comes with a microphone. So if you need a headset built into your headphone, you have the Koss. There you go. There should be a test recording at the end of the review where you can hear how it sounds compared to a placebo recording I made using this Sony lav mic going into the same recording device, which is a Tascam DP008EX, I think. This is the Sony ECM CS3. It's a $20 lav mic. A lot of people kind of hate on it, but for the price, it's not terrible as long as you know how to power it properly. And it's kind of neat in that it has stereo inputs, so there is directionality to the recording if you set it up that way. It's not really relevant for this purpose necessarily, as we're just testing the basic audio quality. I found the Koss mic was inferior to that Sony, but the Sony mic is just a microphone that costs the same amount as the Koss. So you're not getting double duty there, and you're getting a better quality as a result, which you should expect from paying that much money, but it's not always a guarantee. If you're absolutely stuck below $25, here's the three I tried. Those are my thoughts on them. It's really going to depend on the use case that you're looking for. Personally, I would save your money because I think you're going to see some headphones that I review coming up in the 50 and under category that are such a large step above in sound quality that it's going to be worth the price difference. That said, all of them, without fail, are designed for desktop use. So again, if you're looking for mobile, specifically mobile on-ear, These are the only two that I've reviewed so far. The rest are gonna be for desktop use. So if it's something that you're gonna wanna take out and use while at the gym or running or walking, rollerblading, biking, whatever, these would be the two still outside of IEMs. So that's it, really. I mean, next you'll probably be seeing the JVC, the bigger brother, the HA-RX 700, HA-RX 700. You'll be seeing the Koss, the GMX 540 ISO, I think, whichever one they do with drop. And you'll also be seeing the AKG K92. The Koss actually comes with a removable cable. So now that I'm thinking about it, you actually could make that work from mobile because you can just put a new cable in. The JVC and the AKG both have fixed cables, and they're both longer. So they're going to be having a lot of the same problems that the JVC HA-RX 500 had in terms of really where it's meant to be used, or what it's limited to be used by, rather. So yeah, that's the basic roadmap coming up. I'll be doing probably one a week if I can maintain that with my work schedule. This is just really meant to be a summary. I would probably recommend going back and, if you're seeing this first, going back and watching the individual reviews between the ones that you're curious about. This isn't a full sample of all available models. These are just the ones that popped up that interested me. I tend to shy away from nameless brands where I think dealing with warranty might be a problem. And that is an additional issue. Between all of these, the Koss definitely has the best warranty. Especially if you're going to be using it hard, that's going to make a difference. These have a lifetime warranty. And I won't say it's no questions asked, but it's pretty close to no questions asked, at least the last time I checked. I would probably have the most confidence in maintaining a working model through Koss out of these three. And just to clear the air as to the testing methodology on all this, the first is I have been testing all of these on the Magni Heresy hooked up to the Modius. I've been using mostly PC sound, but just to do an efficiency check, I would take these out with the Sony NWA-45B Walkman, which I think only does about 35 milliwatts a channel. It's terrible power output, but it's very convenient to use. And all three of them powered fine, so efficiency should not be your concern on these. Those are my general tests for efficiency and for the equipment I'm using to get the sound out of it. So I'm not using a tube to make them a little bit more pleasant like on the JVCs, and I'm not using the Heresy to brighten up the Kph30i. I do have a THX 789 I could use if I wanted, but I figured that using something a little more budget made sense because you're trying to use these in a budget setup. And I'll probably be maintaining that philosophy until I get to much more expensive headphones. And another note is that every piece of the equipment that I'm using, whether it be the 789 or the Heresy or the Modius, the headphones themselves, are all paid for by me. The whole point of this channel is I want to go out and buy things, so I have the same investment in the product as anyone else who might be interested in buying them. And also to make sure that I'm coming at the purchase from a consumer perspective and not as someone who has a personal relationship with any of the companies. So that's the real parting shot there. That's the final. I'm done, I promise. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time. Next week, I'm debating on which one to start with. I'm leaning towards the HA-RX 700 just because that's the one I've spent the most time with so far. So hopefully you'll see that next week. I'm Adios Amigo, and have a good day.